Okay, in this video tutorial we're going to set up the asteroid health system so we can then shoot the asteroid twice or whatever number you want, and then it will then be destroyed by our player's laser. Okay, so you're going to start off in the player laser tab, and we want this event here where it detects the collision. So when the laser hits the asteroid, it's going to destroy the laser. So what we need to do is we need to actually look for something called a trigger. So I'm going to type in trigger over here in the search bar, and you're going to see all these new blocks called trigger. And if you right mouse click on any of these blocks and then left mouse click find in palette, it will then show you where these blocks come from. So they come from a category called behaviors, triggers, and then you can see that there are triggers for the actor, for scene, for both. So what is a trigger? The best way to describe it is it's like a shout out. The game is shouting out that something happened, like hey, I've been hit, or hey, I got a coin, or hey, I've got the key for the door, or something like that. So the one that we want is we want the second one here that says trigger event blank in all behaviors for the actor. So be real careful that you got that one. And we're going to put it up here in the collision detection. And so it's going to say trigger event blank in all behaviors for self. Alright, so what we need to do is right here in this little tiny box, I know it looks small, but you can actually type in a whole bunch of text here. So we need to come up with a label, a name for this trigger. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to call this Asteroid Hit. And this is the part that's a little confusing for some people, is that you don't actually choose a block in here. You don't click on this little downward arrow and choose something when you're making a trigger event. There's no block over here. You have to just come up with a custom name and then type it manually in there. Be very careful to make sure that you spell everything correctly in here. And you have to remember how you spell this here. Okay? So we're going to say when this trigger happens that has this name, and then we're going to come up here and you'll see we've got these two blue little tags here. They're called tags. You can see it looks a little bit like a tag on a a store tag or something like that. We're going to say actor of type, and we're going to drag the actor of type right there. Okay, so when the laser hits the asteroid, it's going to shout out asteroid hit. That's the name of the trigger. So the asteroid's yelling out, I've been hit. Okay, so now what's going to happen? Now we're going to go over to our asteroid, and we're going to actually detect that that it's been hit. Okay, so to detect that it's been hit, we're going to go to the asteroid tab. We're going to go to add event, and we're going to choose advanced, and we're going to choose custom event. And a custom event is like it sounds. It's basically like a blank piece of paper. You can do anything you want on it. You can see when blank happens. So what you need to do is you need to type in the name of the trigger that you just did over here. So you can either type it in manually or you can copy and paste it, and that's what I recommend you do so you don't make a mistake. So I'm going to select the name of this trigger and I'm going to copy it. Okay, and I just pressed Command C on a Mac. You can also, let's see, can you, okay, so you can't really, let's see, can you come up here and do edit? No, there is no copy. Okay, so on a Windows machine you can press Control C. On a Mac you can do Command C. And then I'll come over here and I'll just click inside here and do Command V, and then it pastes. And that way you guarantee that you get the right name. So just be very careful about that. Alright, so when asteroid hit happens, then what's it going to do? So the best way to understand triggers, in my opinion, is this. This trigger event is the shout out. This is the mouth that's yelling out something has happened. Once the shout out happens, you need an ear that's actually listening that can detect that it happened. And that's what this custom event is. So it's listening. When it hears that this trigger happened, something in here is going to happen. Okay, so now we're going to actually make the health system so that it can actually keep track of the asteroids. So here's the next concept. Attributes. So you're going to click over here on attributes, and you're going to see that there are all these different categories here: getters, setters, so on. We're going to click on getters. we're going to click on Create an Attribute, and we're going to go ahead and call this one Health, because that's what we're keeping track of, and then Asteroid, since we're keeping track of the asteroid's health. We're going to change the type to Number, because we want to keep track of the hit points. So what an attribute basically is you want the game, Stencil, to keep track of any bit of information. So what's the score? What's the health? How much ammo do you have? How much time do you have left in the game? Those are all numbers that the game engine has to keep track of. How many keys have you picked up for the doors? Do you have the red key? Do you have the blue key? You kind of get the idea. You're basically telling the game to remember this bit of important information. So we're going to say OK, and now we get a custom block. So you've literally just made your own smart stencil block. So that's really cool. Okay, so now that we've got this over here, now what we're going to do is we're going to say that when asteroid hit happens, what do you want it to do? And we're going to come over here to Numbers and Text, and we're going to come here to the Math category, and you're going to scroll all the way down until you see this category here, Increment, Decrement. And increment decrement really just means increase or decrease. So we're going to go ahead and drag this out. I'm going to place it right under here. And if you noticed carefully, instead of saying increase number, when you dragged it out, it replaced it with our attribute. And we only have one attribute, so it did it automatically. So what we're going to do is we're going to change increment to decrement. So that means when asteroid hit happens, when it hears that trigger, it's going to decrease the attribute by, and we're going to say by 1. Okay, so we hit the asteroid once, and then it decreases that number by 1. Just to go back one step, in programming, if you've ever heard the term variable, that's what an attribute is. Stencil calls them attributes instead of variables. And again, they're just like boxes that keep track of information. Okay, so now that we've got that, now we're going to go ahead and we need to set the health for the asteroid. So we're going to come up here to Add Event, Basics, and we're going to say when creating. So when the game starts, we're going to come back here to Attributes, and this time we're going to go to Setters. And when you go to Setters, you'll see right here, there we are. So we're going to set our asteroid health to, and you can type in whatever you want. So how many hits do you want the asteroid to be able to take? And I want the asteroid to take 2 hits. I'm going to change the name, and I'll just call this set asteroid health, and there we go. And I'm just going to go ahead and move it up. Okay, there we go. Alright, so as soon as we start the game, it's going to start off with the health asteroid. That attribute is going to be set to 2. Every time the trigger happens, so every time the laser hits the asteroid, it's going to shout out asteroid hit, and every time it hears asteroid hit, it's going to decrease that attribute by 1. Okay, now the finishing step. What happens when it reaches 0? So we're going to add, make sure you're on your asteroid, we're going to do Add Event, Basics, and we're going to do when updating, and that basically means always. And so I'm going to now go to the flow category. I'm going to drag an if block out here, and right here where it says if, I'm going to go to comparison, and I'm going to choose this block down here. So the category is called inequality, and you'll notice that we've got less than, greater than, less than or equals to, greater than or equals to. We're going to choose this one here, less than or equals to. Make sure you get the right block. So we're going to say if, and we're going to click on the down arrow here, and we're going to go to attributes, and we're going to say health asteroid. Okay, so you can do that, or you can just go here to attributes, getters, and drag the health asteroid right there, but that's more work. And then we're going to say if health asteroid is less than or equals to 0, what's going to happen? We're going to type in kill, and we're going to drag our kill block out here so the asteroid goes away. Okay? Now, one important little thing is I didn't want to set this to an equal block, because if I said if health asteroid equals 0, you want it to be less than or equals to, because what can happen is if the player is rapid firing and the hit points actually goes into a negative number, which we can't see, but if the hit points goes to a negative number, then it won't work. It'll say, well, you went beyond 0, so I'm not going to execute the code. So it has to be less than or 0. So that way, if the asteroid's hit points go down to 0 or -1 or -2 or -3, it will still keep track of it. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Let's actually test this and see if it works. Okay, so let's choose a slower one here. So 1, 2, and it goes by 1, 2. Okay, so there you go. You can see that it's actually working. Each of these can take 2 or more hits, and I can go ahead and I've got a fighting chance. Okay, so that's going to be it for this tutorial. In the next tutorial, I'll see if I can upload it real quickly. We'll see if we can add in a little flash effect on the asteroid, so that way the player can definitely tell that they hit it with the asteroid, which will add in a cool little bit of visual effects. So I will see you in the next video. Thank you.